Hi, I'm Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here today with my March reading wrap-up. But I'm going to try something different today. I know my monthly read-ups are always too long. I don't like watching longer videos myself. Not that I don't like them, but I don't have the time. And I'm sure many of you feel the same way. So when I start talking about books, I get caught up and carried away, and I try to edit them down, but they always end up too long. Now, I was participating in 2 different reading challenges in March, in addition to the annual ones that I do all year long, which are on my blog. I participated in Middle Grade March and the Fierce Reads Readathon. So you'll see lots of middle grade books here, mostly on audio, 1 graphic novel. And Fierce Reads was for International Women Month and all about women authors and women characters. So I will mention those as I go, along with what prompts they fit. Okay, so I'm going to start with nonfiction. And I read 2 nonfiction books in March, which is unusual for me. I usually do most of my nonfiction reading in November. But I started out with The Invisible Girls by Sarah Labarge. And this was a perfect fit for the Fierce Reads Readathon. And it fit the category of explores the bonds of female friendship. So this is a memoir and a very powerful story, really moving, warm. The author, Sarah, was brought up in a very restrictive religious environment. However, Sarah kind of broke out of those restrictions that she grew up with. She got a master's degree as a physician's assistant from Yale, and then was also working on a master's degree in journalism at Columbia. She was living in New York City, loving her life. She had a boyfriend who became her fiance, a fairly wealthy man, which was a big change for her. She grew up in rural Pennsylvania. Her life was great. And then when she was only 26 years old, she got devastating breast cancer, double mastectomy, chemotherapy, radiation. She was put through the ringer. So after multiple surgeries, chemo, radiation, a horrible breakup, she was just shattered, both physically and emotionally. So she moved to Portland, Oregon for a fresh start. She was riding the train one day in Portland, still pretty new to the city, and she met an exhausted Ghanaian woman named Hadi, who had 2 little girls with her, like toddler preschool age. And the little girls really took to Sarah, and she was really sweet with them and playing with them. And she started to talk to Hadi, the mom, a little bit. Well, she invited Sarah over to their apartment. And this began a very unique friendship between these very different, but both very damaged women. Hadi was not only a refugee, her husband had been abusive. He had recently left, which was good because he was abusive, but bad because they were left with no means of support in a country where they didn't speak the language. She didn't just have the 2 little girls, she had 5 little girls, all under 12. And she was really struggling. So what followed from her meeting with Sarah was life-changing for both of them. So I did worry a little bit at first that this might be kind of a white savior story. It is nothing like that. Sarah was in a bad place herself, and the 2 women helped each other to heal. It's this beautiful story about connection and found family and hope about these 2 very different damaged women and the joyful little girls that they both love. Wonderful, wonderful memoir. I really loved it. I listened to half of it on audio. There's a long story there. The audio was very good. I recommend that. but the book was good as well. So that was The Invisible Girls by Sarah Labarge. My second nonfiction in March was Why We Read, On Bookworms, Libraries, and Just One More Page Before Lights Out by Shannon Reed. This was my first Booktopia book. Booktopia is a wonderful weekend event that my mom and I attend every spring in Vermont at the Northshire Bookstore. It's this very unique weekend where authors and readers hang out together, talk books, share meals, play games. It is a lot of fun. So each year, the Northshire Bookstore picks about 8 authors. Shannon is one of those featured authors this year, and this sort of memoir essays is her recent release. Absolutely loved this. It is very entertaining. Basically, the book answers that question, why we read, with all kinds of chapter titles that answer that question, like Because We Had to, or To Learn About and From the Past. But some of them are very funny, to make us cry. Maybe not funny, but Because I Wanted Free Pizza. So this book is filled with Shannon's stories, not only about her own reading life from early childhood on, but also her experiences teaching high school English and as a college professor of literature and creative writing. Absolutely wonderful, very entertaining, a quick read with lots of laughs, and it will definitely make your TBR list explode. I read a second Booktopia book in March, and that was The Audacity by Ryan Chapman. So this was a novel, a satire that loosely mirrors the Elizabeth Holmes Theranos case, but the focus is on the spouse who is completely unaware of the fraud and is completely taken by surprise when it comes to light. So the spouse is Guy, a middling musical composer, really didn't have much of a career when he married Victoria. Victoria is a hard-driving, highly motivated, go professional who started a company called Preview with these self-help medical booths located all over the world, and with the simple, achievable aim of curing cancer. So it's about to come out that what she was working on doesn't work, that there is no cure for cancer coming anytime soon, that, some of what she's been saying publicly has been fraudulent. So Guy knew nothing about this. He comes home from a charity gala because he runs the company's philanthropic arm and finds out that Victoria's gone missing and that it's about to be revealed publicly that the company has failed. He quickly finds out. I mean, there's this whole media blitz about her being missing and presumed dead, but Guy figures out very quickly, knowing his wife, that she's gone into hiding to avoid the fallout. So he's taken by surprise. He knows he's about to lose all of the extravagant wealth they live with, and he feels completely betrayed that Victoria didn't even clue him into what was going on. So she had been invited to a weekend event at a private island called The Quorum, run by this multi-billionaire. If you saw Murder at the End of the World on Hulu, it's like that, only on a tropical island instead of a remote compound in Iceland. So this isn't the top 1%. The author says this is the 0.01%. The uber wealthy of the world gathering together, thinking they can solve the world's problems. So this is a satire, and the satire is very good. It's satirizing not just the Theranos case, but the uber wealthy, their arrogance, all kinds of things. So there's a lot of humor in this book. It's not to everyone's taste, though. I recently messaged with another friend who also goes to Booktopia every year. She hated this book. So, Guy's not going to this island retreat to help solve the world's problems. He's going so that he knows his life is coming to an end. He goes to kind of have a blowout last hurrah. So there's a lot of drug use and drinking, a little bit of sex. You know, if you're offended by any of that or don't want to read about it, this is not the book for you. But it is excellent satire. It is very funny. And, you know, I was feeling sorry for Guy. Next up, I read 4 different middle grade books last month, 3 on audio and 1 a graphic novel. I started out with Iceberg by Jennifer Nielsen. This fit the prompt for middle grade March of a 1-word title and for fierce reads of a strong female protagonist. So I love Nielsen's historical fiction, middle grade historical fiction. Loved Lines of Courage, which I just listened to last year, and A Night Divided, which is about the Berlin Wall. And as you might guess from the title, this is about the Titanic. So Hazel is 12 years old. Her father recently died. The family is in dire straits as to find a way to support themselves. She's got multiple brothers and sisters. So as much as she hates to do it, her mom is sending her to New York to live with an aunt and to work in a garment factory at 12. So this is Hazel's future. She gets to the Titanic and finds that even with all of their savings pulled together, she doesn't have enough for the £3 fare for even a third-class ticket. So Hazel finds a way to sneak on board as a stowaway. So Hazel dreams of becoming a journalist. And while she's on the Titanic and she's taking notes about everything, she figures when she gets to New York, she's going to write this great article about what it's like to be on this ship. But she starts to hear things that make her wary about the ship. And of course, we all know where this is going. We know what happened to the Titanic in history. So Hazel gets in some trouble because she's poking her nose into these things. And of course, we know how this story ends. I don't like spoilers, but just in case you are staying away from this because it's too sad, I will tell you that Hazel does survive. So it's a wonderful story about this very, very strong little girl, who overcomes this horrible disaster. I also read Parachute Kids by Betsy C. Tang, a middle grade graphic novel. This features 10-year-old Feng Li, her 14-year-old brother, and her 16-year-old sister. They are visiting Los Angeles on vacation with their parents from Taiwan. However, what their parents haven't told them is that the 3 of them will be staying in the U.S., and that's where this term Parachute Kids comes from. And apparently this is a big trend. Not trend, it's been going on. The book is set in 1981. And the author says this happened to her in 1979. So she's writing from her own experience. Dad returns to Taiwan to get back to his job so he can earn money for the family. The plan is for Mom to stay with the kids, and the parents have bought a house in LA. But then Mom can't get her visa renewed, so she gets sent back to Taiwan as well. So this little girl and her teenage siblings are left all alone in California. The older sister knows English fairly well, but she needs to be ready to take the SAT next year. And being able to converse a bit in English as a second language is not the same as being able to get a good score on the verbal section of the SAT when you're just learning English. Feng Li doesn't know any English at all, and she is thrust into an American school into the 5th grade where she can't understand what's going on. So these kids are dealing with a lot. But at the same time, the book also deals with some very familiar adolescent issues, sibling rivalry, falling in with the wrong crowd. But while they're dealing with these typical kid things, they're also trying to run a household by themselves and keep it secret. Fascinating book, but also very entertaining. I liked that the yellow captions were when they're speaking Taiwanese, and then there were white captions when they're speaking English. And so it gives you a little glimpse into the language barrier and the difficulty there. As you can see, the drawings are wonderful. The illustrations are great. The story is engrossing. And it's all based on a true story, and one that apparently is fairly common. So really enjoyed Parachute Kids by Betsy C. Tang. Would definitely recommend this. Oh, for middle grade March, this fit the prompt for a story about immigration. And for Fierce Reads, I tagged this one as a fierce female author, given the fact that she went through this herself as a child and is now writing about it. My next middle grade novel on audio was Dear Sweet Pea by Julie Murphy. And for middle grade March, this counted for me as an author that I had missed out on. Julie Murphy is well known for her very popular YA novels. This was her first middle grade novel, and my first by her at all. So this is about a girl, 12-year-old Sweet Pea. That is what everyone calls her, even her teachers, who feels torn apart by her parents' divorce. Now, her mother is a psychologist and is done some amazing things to try to make it as seamless as possible. Her parents now live in separate but identical houses, 2 doors down from each other. And the houses are even decorated the same. But, of course, it is still difficult for Sweet Pea. She's still struggling with this. At the same time, she is still grieving the loss of her first best friend, a girl named Kira, who the year before started hanging out with prettier, thinner, more popular girls, and Sweet Pea felt completely left out. In fact, these girls often made fun of her, so she and Kira haven't spoken. She really misses her. The only saving grace is that she does have a new best friend, Oscar. They don't talk about it, but Sweet Pea thinks Oscar's probably gay. And her own father has recently come out, which was the reason for the divorce. So there's a lot going on here. The novel deals with typical adolescent issues: divorce, life changes, friendship, keeping secrets. What I always say is the foundation of most fiction. But the whole book, it deals with all these things with warmth and humor. I enjoyed it. I can see why Julie Murphy's so popular. My final middle grade novel for the month, also on audio, was Home Away from Home by Cynthia Lord, a middle grade author I've enjoyed in the past. For middle grade March, this fit the prompt of an animal on the cover, as you can see. So I think this is another 12-year-old. Mia and her mother always visit her grandmother in Maine during the summer. This year, Mia's on her own. Her mom and her mom's boyfriend are spending the summer clearing out their house, selling it, and buying a new house so that they can have a fresh start. And of course, as with Sweet Pea, this is all very, very difficult for Mia. Even before she left home, the real estate agent was telling them they had to clear out all personal items, staging the house. They repainted her bedroom. It's a lot of change for Mia. So she's looking forward to the summer with her grandma, where, they have all these traditions and everything's exactly the same. Except this year, it's not. There's a new neighbor who has a son named Cayman, and for reasons Mia doesn't understand, Cayman seems to have made himself at home at her grandmother's house. So there's a little jealousy there. There's clearly something going on with Cayman's mom that Mia doesn't understand. So the two kids, they are kind of thrown together. There is a pair of eagles in town that are famous. The town has named them, and they just had babies. So Mia and Cayman take the trail down to the area where they can see the nest and the eaglets. And while they're there, they spot this really unusual, enormous white bird of prey, all white. And so they start an investigation to figure out what this is. So this also obviously deals with issues like divorce and friendship. There's also a strong thread here about social media and the problems that can arise when you share too much on social media. So that's a through line here as well. What I really loved was the hefty dose of nature in this novel. The location, a seaside town in Maine, something I love, was heavily featured. The eagles and this strange bird of prey, so I really enjoyed that. And finally, at the beginning of the month, I listened to a YA novel on audio because I thought it was middle grade. Oops. When I realized the two main characters were both 18, I thought, I better check this out. So it is YA, but wonderful novel. I am so glad I listened to it. Butterfly Yellow by Ten Ha Lai. I'm trying to get the name right. There's a lot of Vietnamese in this novel, so I was really glad I listened to it on audio. This novel won the Scott Odell Award for Historical Fiction. It begins at the end of the Vietnam War when 12-year-old Hung takes her little brother Lin to the airport. They have heard that Americans are shipping children out to the U.S. to get away from the war. They're not technically orphans. They did lose their father in the war. Their mother is still around and their grandma, but they know, the mother and grandma know that life under communist rule, even as the war is wrapping up, is going to be difficult, and they want a better life for the kids. So they go and try to get on these airplanes, but it turns out they only want little kids, babies and toddlers. Now, because Americans don't really understand that the Vietnamese children are much smaller than American children, they do take Lin, who's 5 years old at the time, but they think is 3. But Hung gets left behind. So she spends the next 6 years, first with her mom and then with her grandma, planning on how to get her brother back and how to reunite with him. So 6 years later, finally, in 1983, Hung makes it to the United States through a horrific, treacherous journey as a refugee. She travels to Texas. All she knows about her brother is a torn piece of paper with an address on it that someone put in her hand at the airport. So she goes to that address. It's in like remote central Texas, and her brother's not there. But when Hung misses a bus and is completely lost, she's been practicing English for 6 years, but without hearing it spoken. Her father had left behind National Geographic magazines, and that's how she taught herself English. So she knows some English words, but her pronunciation is way off. Luckily, an 18-year-old cowboy wannabe named Leroy, he was actually brought up in kind of a wealthy hippie family, but he wants to be a real cowboy. He's on his way in his pickup truck to find, he wants to be in the rodeo, but to find work at a ranch. He picks up Hung and agrees to help her find her brother. This is a beautifully told, warm, moving story. I was very glad I listened to it on audio so that I could really experience the kind of language barrier that Hung was experiencing, knowing English but not knowing how to pronounce it. And the audio was great for hearing the correct pronunciation of the Vietnamese words, including her name. So I practiced. Just an outstanding novel about family, trauma. You don't find until later in the novel, find out exactly what Hong went through to get to the US, and about starting over and hope. Hung was determined to find her brother at all costs. She definitely qualifies for fierce reads, and I chose this novel as favorite female character. That still took way too long. I'm hoping I will cut it back in editing. I'll keep trying. So that's what I read in March. I would love to hear what you read. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite books were that you read last month.